Hello. So previously I have touched on the issue of Westerners who are pro-Putin and defend the Putin regime. And this has actually been very palpable if we look at RT, not just the sort of people who contribute to RT and appear on the show, but the sort of people who lap up every word it says. Um, just a quick disclaimer here. I think this is important. I am a believer in freedom of expression. So I am not proposing that people not be allowed to have their opinion, regardless of how odious I think it might be. But I do think if people take certain positions, then they do open themselves up to scrutiny and criticism if they're contentious positions. And I think one noticeable thing about Western democracy over the last 10, 15 years, with the rise of global internet and a lot of other factors, is the rise of conspiracy theories. And what's interesting is so many conspiracy theories are directed at Western power, especially the United States. Okay, there's a few about the British royal family, but most conspiracy theories at their basis have something to do with the CIA or American power. And that sort of makes sense because the United States is the most powerful country on earth. But that sort of mentality of endorsing conspiracy theories blindly without any sort of stepping back, any sort of sense of just thoughtfulness, really. This blind willingness to just believe the alternative must be the truth. Um, that seems to be a real hallmark of the sort of people I'm referring to. So anyway, I've been talking about those who are pro-Russia, and a few of them are celebrities. Even Seagal comes to mind. Oliver Stone is another. But we're starting to see it with Westerners who are pro-China now as well. By pro-China here, I mean pro-Chinese government. I'll be quite honest, it makes my stomach turn. One guy that comes to mind, I've been checking out some of his videos. Unfortunately, he has my namesake. His name's Nathan Rich, and he has these videos. He's quite viral, certainly a lot more than I am. He gets a lot of views. He's based in China, American guy. Um, and he has these videos which on the surface sound quite neutral and quite reasonable, but when you really listen a little bit, you really see what pitch he's driving at least if you are paying attention. If you're pro CCP, you're going to lap him up and you're going to think he's great. I've noticed a lot of Chinese CCP supporters are praising this guy. A lot of his supporters are Chinese. Um, some of them might not even be CCP supporters. They might be ordinary Chinese citizens who have kind of been bought into the idea that criticism of the Chinese government is the same as anti-Chinese racism. I saw one video which I found particularly contentious, where he was attacking the Western concept of freedom of expression as somehow condoning anti-Chinese racism. Well, my response to that was, you're criticizing anti-Chinese racism, but where's your criticism of racism coming from China? I mean, the basics of it is this. In China, only one opinion is really permitted, which is pro-CCP opinions. Anyone who claims with a straight face that people can freely express views that are anti-CCP in China, they're simply lying through their teeth. Now, that's the basis of it. The West, for all its faults, you are generally not going to be arrested as a spy if you make a pro Chinese government video in the United States. Certainly not if you do it in Canada or Britain. Um, And as an example of that, we're not just talking about China, we're talking about other hostile regimes as well. Um, I know of a guy who had a whole channel devoted to North Korea. Young British guy. I had a bit of an exchange with him. Now, he wasn't in North Korea, he was living in the UK, somewhere in the south of England. Um, he had a flag at the back. I actually thought it was satire at first. I thought it was some sort of joke. But it was deadly serious. And he was making these propaganda videos, and without any sort of, you know, self awareness of just how intensely his positions were coming across, intensely pro Pyongyang. Um, but the point is, he was doing that. He wasn't getting a knock on the door, being asked was he a spy working for the North Koreans. No, that's Western tolerance. And people will use these racist attacks against Chinese nationals as being evidence somehow of an anti-China plot. Those incidents are ugly, they're regrettable, and well, they're more than regrettable. They're wrong, absolutely wrong, and the perpetrators need to be held to account. But I am very unhappy about the way that anti-Chinese racism has been conflated with legitimate criticism of the CCP. It's a very, very dangerous thing. It's a bit like when Islamists will use the Islamophobia smear in order to silence legitimate criticism about Islamic dogma, or more specifically, Islamist dogma. Freedom of speech means the right to offend, or at least it includes that. Doesn't mean you can go out and advocate violence or hate. But I basically believe in free speech in the broadest definition possible. Certainly a lot more than it is in China. But I do think that these Western stooges are an utter disgrace. And I do think, I don't say this lightly, but I think they're moral cards. Because someone like Nathan Rich, who lives in China, don't know which city he's in, but he's clearly based in China. He's not stupid, he's clearly quite an assertive person. But I do question his ethical judgment. I think people like that, they make videos that basically parrot the narrative of the Chinese state. That is to say that China's somehow a victim. I think maybe it's a human thing. I think they do it for popularity. Now, most people, if they're being honest, like to get acclaim. I'm not going to lie. I like when I see positive feedback. Um, I'd like a lot more subscribers. I'd like support. But when you consider that as a basic human thing, it makes total sense that someone living in China, a Westerner living in China, would see some benefits in making pro-China videos or pro-CCP videos because they're going to become very popular. They're going to be the useful Westerner. Oh, look, this guy's a Westerner, but he condemns Western media. I would say useful idiot, but I'm not actually sure that they are idiots. I think some of them are, but I think a guy like this, Nathan Rich, I think he's even worse. He's not just ignorant, he's actually quite smart. But to me, the moral difference is really that not that profound from someone who would defend the Third Reich in the 1930s. Because I do believe that the Chinese government is repugnant to its core. I think it's totalitarian, that goes without question. It's got worse. It's incredibly dishonest. It values lies above losing face. And there's very powerful forces at work. But I must admit, I do feel angry when I see Westerners engaging in this sort of thing because they are taking the easy route. There's nothing brave about being in China and being a Westerner promoting the CCP line. If you're a Westerner in China and you say anything against the CCP, you could end up being accused of espionage. So it's actually a very easy thing to do. Some of them live in the West, but those who actually live in China, I suppose at least they're practicing what they preach. But it is interesting that they often use YouTube to do it. I just find it profoundly depressing seeing the amount of, despite the evidence, despite the information that is available, people will still defend dictatorships. They will still promote the lies of dictatorships. And they will do it in such a way that it's quite deceptive. I mean, someone like Nathan Rich isn't going to come out and say, "Oh, I'm a supporter of the CCP. They're all great." Most of the time, they don't do that. They're a bit more subtle than that. But what they will do is parrot the narrative that China's a victim. Um, and in a way, I am more resentful of Westerners who do this than Chinese nationals because nationals, you can sort of understand there's a certain way of thinking at play there. They're fiercely nationalistic. You know, they've been reared on that from when they were toddlers. And you get it on some level in every country. I mean, you know, there were patriotic sentiments in the UK today with VE Day. So patriotism and nationalism exists to some extent in most, certainly every powerful country. So although I think the behaviour of some Chinese nationals overseas is very obnoxious, it's not at all surprising. China is a great country. Let me put it this way: if I was a Chinese national, I honestly don't know what my thinking would be. Would I be a propagandist? I might be. I might be sucked up into that nationalistic hysteria. Could very well be. So I sort of understand that, but I'm a lot less understanding, or I won't say forgiving, because I'm not forgiving of Chinese nationalists pushing their agenda in other countries, but Westerners who do it, words fail me, because these people know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they do enjoy a lot of support, because in countries like China and Russia, they're held up to be, oh, they're radicals, they're outsiders, they're so brave. But fundamentally, what you have to do is compare the two systems: Western democracy versus Chinese and Russian totalitarianism. And actually, Western democracy is very, very fragile right now. Very. Not helped by the current incumbent in the White House. I think Trump has deeply damaged Western democracy with his assault on the media. You know, the fact that journalists question and criticize Trump and the fact he lashes out, I honestly think that's picked up by Putin and Xi as a way to attack the West. Um, I mean, when I overthink these things, it can be profoundly depressing, seeing the extent that the lies go, seeing the extent of how Chinese and Russian state apparatus actually infiltrates cyberspace and by extension our societies. What solution do I propose? Well, I wouldn't necessarily have someone like Nathan Rich silenced, but I would like to see more of a backlash against people like him. I'm not talking physical, I'm not talking about threats, but more of a revulsion at these people who are basically acting as yes men, occasionally yes women, for the indefensible. China lied, people died. That's not racism, it's a fact. I mean, Nathan Rich isn't the only one, there's others out there. And the thing is, they will be promoted on Weibo and QQ and other Chinese networks because they're Westerners. Now, some Chinese might say, oh, well, what about when the West holds up human rights activists, Chinese human rights activists, in order to criticize China? Big difference. There's actually evidence for the things they are saying. Whereas these China stooges, I should say, the sort of things that they're talking about have pretty much no evidence. They're based on conspiracy theories. They're based on emotive language rather than actually hard facts. So they'll say things like, I, as a Westerner, oppose the Western media's vilification of the Chinese people. They'll conveniently ignore the fact that the Western media is not vilifying the Chinese people, rightly scrutinizing the Chinese government for its lies. Lies which, by the way, have now had an effect on the rest of the world. Um, so when I think about these things, I do feel quite depressed. You know, when I see such people get a lot of support. And I know why it happens because they're useful. It's just very, very depressing. And I find there isn't, you know, you look at the threads on these sort of channels and it's basically just groupthink. It's groupthink. There's no one who really thinks for themselves. It's all just this subservient. This guy tells the truth, except he's not. He's cherry picking. He's talking about Nathan Rich here. He's promoting double standards, and he is parroting the exact same narrative that the Chinese state uses. I think some Chinese nationals, there is a known phenomenon of the so-called 50 Cent Brigade. That is Chinese nationals who are actually paid to promote pro-CCP propaganda online. In the case of Westerners who do it, I don't actually think it's a financial incentive. I think it's a popularity incentive. I think they're virtue signaling. I think they just want to claim. They probably have affection for the Chinese culture, as I do, but they take it to a new level. You know, I've lived and worked in China twice, and I had some very good times there. I've got some very good memories. I have a lot of affection for many aspects of the culture, the hospitality of the people. One thing I'm proud I never done, I never sold my soul. Not once. I didn't go out there and, you know, just go out of my way to try and criticize the CCP because I didn't want to be reckless and, you know, that's not what I was there for. But I didn't sell my soul. And I think there's some Westerners who think that they're being open-minded by virtue signaling in this way. And frankly, it's pretty pathetic. I just think it's very morally vacuous. But, you know, it's human nature. Anyway, I'll round this up. But that's some of my honest thoughts. Very sad.